I never thought that answering our doorbell on December 23rd would be the moment my entire world collapsed. The mailman handed me a single Christmas card addressed to my husband, and when I casually opened it thinking it was from a colleague, I saw something that made me question everything I thought I knew about our 35-year marriage. That innocent holiday card contained a secret so devastating it would force me to make the hardest decision of my life. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. What I discovered that day would change not just Christmas, but everything I believed about the man I'd been married to for over 3 decades. My name is Dorothy, and until that December afternoon, I believed I was living in a fairy tale marriage. Charles and I had been together since we were college sweethearts. We met at Northwestern University in 1987, married right after graduation, and built what I thought was a perfect life together. He was a successful sales manager for a medical equipment company, which required him to travel frequently throughout the Midwest. I was a retired elementary school teacher who had dedicated my life to making our home a sanctuary he could return to after his demanding business trips. We had settled into a comfortable routine over the years. Charles would leave every other week for what he called regional client visits, sometimes staying away for 4 or 5 days at a time. During these trips, he would call me every evening to check in, telling me about difficult clients, long meetings, and hotel rooms that never felt like home. I would update him on my garden club activities, book club meetings, and the small-town gossip that kept me entertained while he was away. Our friends always commented on how devoted we were to each other, how Charles's face would light up when he talked about me, how I would beam with pride when discussing his career success. We seemed to have that rare thing, a marriage that had grown stronger over the decades rather than weaker. But marriage, I've learned, is sometimes built on foundations you never think to examine until something forces you to look beneath the surface. That December morning started like any other. Charles had left 3 days earlier for what he described as a crucial year-end client presentation in Minneapolis. The snow was falling steadily, creating that magical Christmas card atmosphere that made our neighborhood look like something from a Hallmark movie. I had spent the morning wrapping presents for our nephews and nieces, humming Christmas carols and feeling grateful for the quiet contentment of our life together. When the doorbell rang at exactly 2:15 p.m., I was arranging fresh evergreen boughs on our mantelpiece. Our mailman, Jerry, stood on the porch holding a single envelope and shivering in the cold. "Afternoon, Mrs. Henderson," he said, handing me the card. "This one requires a signature, certified mail." I signed his clipboard, thanked him, and closed the door, examining the envelope as I walked back to the living room. It was addressed to Charles Henderson, in elegant feminine handwriting, with a return address from Riverside, Illinois, a suburb I vaguely recognized but had never visited. The postmark was from 2 days earlier. Charles received business correspondence at home occasionally, usually year-end bonuses or corporate communications that couldn't wait for his return to the office. I had always opened his mail when he was traveling, handling bill payments and organizing important documents so he wouldn't return to a pile of administrative tasks. I settled into my favorite armchair by the fireplace and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a traditional Christmas card with a winter scene, nothing unusual about that. But when I opened the card, my hands began trembling so violently that I nearly dropped it. The left side of the card contained a family photograph. In that photo, my husband of 35 years was sitting in a cozy living room I had never seen, his arm around a woman I had never met. She was younger than me, probably in her early 40s, with dark hair and a warm smile. She was wearing a red Christmas sweater and leaning into Charles as if they had posed for family photos 1,000 times before. But it was the children in the photograph that made my world stop spinning. 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, ranging in age from what looked like 8 years old to maybe 16. They were arranged around Charles and this unknown woman, and the resemblance was unmistakable. The oldest boy had Charles's distinctive cleft chin and dark eyes. The girl had his stubborn cowlick that no amount of hair product could ever tame. The youngest boy was practically a carbon copy of Charles at that age, based on the childhood photos I had memorized from his family albums. These were Charles's children. There was no doubt about it. On the right side of the card, written in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "Merry Christmas, Daddy. We can't wait for you to come home for New Year's. Love always, Emma, Jake, and Tommy. P.S. Mom says to tell you the surprise is ready." I stared at those words until they blurred together. Daddy. These children called my husband Daddy. My husband, who had told me for 35 years that he wasn't interested in having children, that his career was too demanding for family life, that we were perfectly complete as a couple. I read the message again. "We can't wait for you to come home for New Year's. Not come visit or come see us. Come home," as if he belonged there, as if this other family was his real family. The room began to spin. I closed the card, opened it again, closed it again, as if somehow the image might change or reveal itself to be some kind of misunderstanding. But the photograph remained the same. Charles, looking relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, surrounded by a family I never knew existed. I sat in that chair for 3 hours, holding that card and trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Every Christmas card we had ever received flashed through my mind. Every family photo we had never taken, because it was always just the two of us. Every conversation about children, where Charles had seemed uncomfortable and changed the subject quickly. How long had this been going on? How many years had I been decorating our house for Christmas while he was celebrating the holiday with another family? How many business trips had actually been visits to see his children? The youngest child looked about 8 years old, which meant this deception had been going on for at least 8 years. But the older children suggested it had been much longer, possibly decades. I had been married to a stranger, a man who had built an entire secret life, complete with another wife and 3 children, while I waited at home believing I was his entire world. As the shock began to wear off, it was replaced by something else. Anger. Pure, burning anger that started in my chest and spread through my entire body like wildfire. I had given this man 35 years of my life. I had turned down career opportunities to support his ambitions. I had moved 6 times to accommodate his job transfers. I had made our home beautiful and peaceful and welcoming, never suspecting that he had another home where he was building memories with children who would never know I existed. The worst part was the deception. Not just the other family, but the elaborate lies that must have been required to maintain this double life. Every phone call from his business trips, every explanation about his travel schedule, every reassurance that he was working late or meeting with clients. How many of those had been lies? I looked around our living room, our carefully decorated, childless living room, and realized how much of my life had been built around accommodating a man who was living a completely different life half the time. Rehook num 1. But what I discovered when I started investigating his travel records would reveal that this secret family was just the beginning of Charles's deceptions. That evening, I did something I had never done in our entire marriage. I went into Charles's home office and began methodically searching through his personal papers. If he could lie about having 3 children and another wife, what else had he been hiding? I started with his calendar, cross-referencing his business travel dates with the times he had claimed to be in various cities. What I found made my hands shake all over again. For the past 2 years, every trip to Minneapolis had actually corresponded with school events listed on a Riverside Elementary School calendar I found tucked inside his desk drawer. Parent-teacher conferences, school plays, soccer games. While I had been proudly telling our friends about his important business presentations, Charles had been attending his children's school events. I found more evidence hidden in his filing cabinet. Receipts from a jewelry store in Riverside for a woman's bracelet purchased last Valentine's Day, while he had given me a generic card and taken me to dinner at our usual restaurant. A membership card for a family gym in the same suburb. Report cards for Emma Henderson, Jake Henderson, and Tommy Henderson, all showing Charles listed as their father and emergency contact. Emma Henderson, Jake Henderson, Tommy Henderson. These children had his name. They weren't the result of some casual affair or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a full second family, complete with legal documentation. But the most shocking discovery was a life insurance policy I had never seen before. Charles had a second policy, separate from the one that listed me as beneficiary, that would pay $500,000 to Linda Henderson in the event of his death. Linda Henderson, the woman in the Christmas card photo, apparently his second wife. I sat in his office until nearly midnight, surrounded by evidence of a life I had never suspected existed. Charles wasn't just cheating on me, he was living as a completely different person when he was away from our home. My phone rang at 10:30 p.m., Charles calling from his hotel room as he did every night when he traveled. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "How was your day?" For 35 years I would have chatted about my activities and asked about his meetings. That night I listened to his voice and wondered how many lies were about to come out of his mouth. "My day was enlightening," I said carefully. "Oh? Did something interesting happen?" "You could say that. Charles, what do you know about Riverside, Illinois?" There was a pause, a very long pause. "Riverside. I'm not sure I know what you mean. It's a suburb of Chicago. Nice family neighborhood, from what I understand. Good schools." Another pause. "Dorothy, you sound upset. Is everything all right?" "I received some interesting mail today, a Christmas card addressed to you." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that I wondered if the call had been disconnected. "Charles, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice had changed completely. Gone was the warm, loving tone. He sounded like a stranger. "Would you like to explain the photograph in that Christmas card?" "Dorothy, I can explain everything." "I'm listening." It's complicated. I imagine it would be 35 years of marriage, and I discover my husband has 3 children and another wife. Yes, that does seem complicated. She's not my wife. The life insurance policy that lists Linda Henderson as your beneficiary suggests otherwise." Another long silence. "How did you find that?" "I found a lot of things tonight, Charles. Report cards, gym memberships, receipts, calendar coordination with school events. Should I continue?" "Dorothy, please, let me come home. We need to talk about this in person." "Oh, you want to come home? To which home? Charles? This one or the one in Riverside?" I heard him take a shaky breath. "I never meant for you to find out this way." "How exactly did you mean for me to find out? Or were you planning to take this secret to your grave?" "It's not what you think. Really. Because what I think is that you've been living a double life for years, possibly decades. What I think is that you have 3 children who call you daddy while you've spent 35 years telling me you didn't want kids. What I think is that you've been lying to me about every single business trip for God knows how long. Dorothy, don't. Just don't. I'll be staying at my sister's house until you get back. We'll discuss this when you return, but not over the phone. I need time to process exactly how much of my life has been a lie." I hung up before he could respond. Rehook Tum too. But the most devastating discovery was still ahead of me, hidden in a place I never thought to look. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I continued searching through our house, looking for evidence of exactly how deep Charles's deception went. In our bedroom, I found a second cell phone hidden in the back of his sock drawer. When I turned it on, the wallpaper photo showed him with the same 3 children from the Christmas card, but this time they were at what looked like an amusement park. The text message history on that phone painted a picture of Charles as a completely different person. Messages from Linda about parent-teacher conferences and soccer practice schedules. Messages from Emma asking Daddy to help with her science project when he got home. Messages from Jake sharing photos of his Little League games. These weren't the messages of a man having an affair. These were the messages of a father actively involved in his children's daily lives. I scrolled through months of messages, each one feeling like a knife twist. Charles discussing Emma's college preparation plans. Charles promising to attend Tommy's Christmas play. Charles reassuring Linda that he would be home in time for Jake's birthday party. But it was the timestamps on these messages that truly broke me. Many of them had been sent while Charles was sitting right here in our living room with me. While we were watching television together, he had been texting his other family. While I was making dinner, he had been making plans with his other wife. I found photos on the phone that documented years of family moments I had never been part of. Birthday parties and Halloween costumes, first days of school and Christmas mornings, beach vacations and camping trips that Charles had told me were intensive corporate training seminars. There were even photos of Charles teaching Jake to ride a bike, something he had never mentioned wanting to do when we discussed having children early in our marriage. But the most crushing discovery came when I found a video message from Emma, apparently recorded for Father's Day earlier that year. "Hi, Daddy," the teenage girl said, smiling into the camera. "I know you can't be with us today because of your work situation, but I wanted you to know how much I love you and how proud I am to be your daughter. I can't wait until everything gets settled and we can all be together as a real family. Mom says it won't be much longer now, and then you won't have to keep traveling so much for work." Everything gets settled. They were planning for Charles to leave me. This wasn't a man torn between two families. This was a man who had already chosen his real family and was just waiting for the right time to abandon the decoy family he had been maintaining. I was the other woman in my own marriage. I was the inconvenience that needed to be settled so that Charles could have his real life with his real family. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't even cry. I sat on our bed holding that phone, watching video after video of my husband being the father to other people's children that he had never offered to be to mine. Charles called 6 more times that night. I didn't answer. He sent text messages to our home phone, begging me to let him explain, promising that things were more complicated than they appeared, insisting that he loved me and had never meant to hurt me. But I had seen the evidence. Charles had made his choice long ago. I was just the woman who had been too trusting to notice that I was living in the shadow of his real life. At dawn, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Charles about this betrayal. I was going to meet his other family. Rehook number 3. The drive to Riverside would lead me to a discovery that would change both families forever. The next morning, Christmas Eve, I loaded my car with all the evidence I had found and drove the 2 hours to Riverside, Illinois. I had Linda Henderson's address from the insurance policy, and I had questions that only she could answer. The house was a beautiful 2-story colonial in a neighborhood clearly designed for families. Swing sets and bicycles dotted the front yards. Christmas decorations hung from every house, and the whole street looked like something from a family movie. I parked across from 847 Maple Street and studied the house that had been Charles's second home for years. It was larger than ours, with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees. There were children's toys on the front lawn and a minivan in the driveway. As I sat there gathering my courage, the front door opened and Emma Henderson walked out. She was even prettier in person than in the photographs, clearly a sophomore or junior in high school. She was followed by the 2 boys from the Christmas card photo, Jake and Tommy. Watching Charles's children laugh and play in their front yard was surreal. These kids had no idea that their father had another wife 2 hours away. They lived their daily lives believing that their family was complete and normal, just as I had lived mine. I waited until the children went back inside, then walked to the front door and rang the doorbell. Linda Henderson answered, wearing a red Christmas sweater identical to the one in the photograph. She was even more striking in person. Warm brown eyes, an easy smile, the kind of woman who probably made friends effortlessly and remembered everyone's birthday. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. "I'm Dorothy Henderson," I said, "Charles's wife." Her face went completely white. For a moment, I thought she might faint. "I think we need to talk," I continued gently. Linda invited me in, her hands shaking as she led me to her living room. It was the same room from the Christmas card photo, decorated for the holidays with obvious care and attention. There were framed school photos of the 3 children on the mantelpiece and several pictures of Charles that I had never seen before. "How did you find us?" Linda asked quietly. "Charles received a Christmas card at our house yesterday, with a family photo." Linda closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Emma insisted on sending it. I told her to mail it to his office, but she said it was more personal to send it to his home address. "Linda, I need you to help me understand something. How long has this been going on?" 18 years, she whispered. 18 years? My voice cracked. "You've been together for 18 years? We met when Emma was just a baby. Charles was traveling through Chicago on business, and we met at a coffee shop. I was a single mother struggling to make ends meet, and he was this charming, successful businessman who seemed genuinely interested in helping me." I felt sick. While I had been celebrating our 17th wedding anniversary, Charles had been starting a relationship with another woman and her infant daughter. "He told me he was divorced," Linda continued. "He said his ex-wife lived in another state and they had an amicable separation but no contact. When Emma started calling him daddy, he didn't correct her. When I got pregnant with Jake, Charles was so excited about becoming a father that I never questioned his story. And when you got pregnant with Tommy, Charles had been talking about us getting married. He said he was just waiting for some legal issues with his ex-wife to be resolved, something about property division. I believed him because I loved him, and because he was such a wonderful father to all 3 children. I looked at this woman who had been unknowingly sharing my husband for nearly 2 decades. She wasn't a villain or a homewrecker. She was another victim of Charles's elaborate deceptions. "Linda, what did Charles tell you about his work schedule? About why he was away so much?" "He said he was a regional sales manager and had to travel constantly. He said it was the price of his success, but that once he got promoted to a more senior position, he'd be able to be home more." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "He promised that this year would be different, that he was finally going to get everything sorted out so we could be a real family." "By sorted out, you mean divorcing me?" "He said you 2 had been separated for years but living in the same house for financial reasons. He said you were more like roommates than a married couple." Linda was crying now. "He said you both knew the marriage was over but hadn't made it official yet." The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, that I almost admired Charles's creativity. He had convinced Linda that I was practically a stranger to him, while convincing me that she and the children didn't exist. "Linda, I need you to know that Charles and I were not separated. We shared a bedroom. We celebrated anniversaries. Just last month he told me he loved me and couldn't imagine life without me." Linda doubled over as if I had punched her. Oh God, what have I done?" "You didn't do anything wrong. You were lied to, just like I was." We sat in that living room, 2 women who had loved the same man without knowing the other existed, trying to piece together the extent of Charles's betrayal. "The children," I said finally. "Do they know about me?" "They know Charles travels for work. They know that's why he can't be here all the time. But they think you're his business partner or something. He's shown them pictures of you and said you work together. He's shown them pictures of me. He said it was important for them to know the people in his professional life. Emma has always been curious about you. She asks questions about whether you're nice, whether you have children of your own." My heart broke for this teenage girl who had been unknowingly curious about her father's other wife. "Linda, what are you going to tell them?" Before she could answer, we heard the front door open. "Mom, we're back from sledding," Jake's voice called from the entryway. Linda and I looked at each other in panic. "They can't see you here," she whispered. "They don't understand." "Mom, whose car is in front of our house?" Emma's voice was getting closer to the living room. Linda stood up quickly. "I'll tell them you're a friend from work, just until we figure out how to handle this." But as Emma rounded the corner into the living room, she stopped dead in her tracks. "You're Dorothy," she said simply, "from Dad's pictures." Rehook num 4. What Emma said next would force both families to confront a truth that Charles had been hiding for almost 2 decades. Your dad's business partner, right? Emma continued, but there was something in her voice that suggested she was testing me rather than simply identifying me. Emma, Mrs. Henderson was just stopping by to... Linda started. Mom. Emma's voice was firm, more mature than her 16 years should have allowed. We need to stop pretending. Linda and I stared at the teenager standing in the doorway. Emma, what are you talking about? I know Dad is married to Dorothy. I've known for 3 years. The silence in the room was deafening. I'm not stupid, Mom. Dad has been coming here for my whole life, but he's never spent a single holiday with us. He's never brought his clothes here. He gets phone calls that he takes in another room. He leaves at weird times and always has explanations about work emergencies that never quite make sense. Emma walked into the living room and sat down across from us. When I was 13, I got curious and looked him up online. I found his real address, and I found Dorothy's name listed as his wife. I saw their wedding announcement in their local newspaper from 1989. I did the math, Mom. They got married 7 years before you even met Dad. Linda was staring at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. 3 years, Linda whispered. You've known for 3 years and never said anything? I kept hoping Dad would tell you the truth. I kept thinking that maybe there was something I didn't understand, that maybe they really were separated like Dad said. But then I saw them together. You saw them together? I asked. Last summer, when Dad took me to Chicago for my birthday, I saw them at a restaurant, holding hands and laughing. They didn't look like two people who were separated. They looked like they were married. Emma turned to face me directly. Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and please tell me the truth. Are you and my dad still married? I looked at this brave, intelligent young woman who had been carrying her father's secret for 3 years, trying to protect her mother from a truth she was too young to bear. Yes, Emma, we're still married. We've been married for 35 years. Emma nodded as if she had expected this answer. And you didn't know about us until yesterday, did you? No, I had no idea you existed. Emma, Linda said, her voice barely audible, why didn't you tell me? Because I love you, Mom, and I love Jake and Tommy, and I didn't want to destroy our family. Emma's composure finally cracked, and tears started flowing down her cheeks. But I also felt horrible for Dorothy, because I could see that she loved Dad and had no idea that he was living this whole other life with us. This teenager had been carrying the weight of her father's lies for 3 years, trying to protect everyone involved, while wrestling with the moral complexity of a situation that adult counselors struggle to navigate. Emma, where are your brothers? Linda asked. They're building a snowman in the backyard. They don't know anything about this. Jake thinks Dad travels for work, and Tommy just accepts that Daddy isn't here all the time because he's little. But Mom, they're going to figure it out eventually, especially Jake. He's starting to ask harder questions about why Dad never takes us to meet his family, or why we can't visit him at his office. I watched this family that Charles had created through deception, and realized that his lies had damaged not just Linda and me, but his own children. Emma had spent 3 years of her adolescence keeping an adult secret. Jake was developing trust issues about his father's explanations. Tommy was growing up thinking it was normal for fathers to be absent most of the time. Emma, I said carefully, what do you think should happen now? I think Dad needs to make a choice, a real choice. Not this awful situation where everyone is getting hurt and nobody has the whole truth. Emma wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I think you and Mom deserve better than this, and honestly, I think Jake and Tommy deserve to know who their father really is, even if that's painful. This 16-year-old girl was showing more maturity and moral courage than her father had demonstrated in 18 years. Emma, there's something else you need to know, I said. Your father is supposed to come home tomorrow for New Year's, but he's also supposed to be at my house tomorrow for our traditional New Year's Eve dinner. I don't think he was planning to choose between families. I think he was planning to keep lying to both of us. Emma closed her eyes. So nothing was going to change. No, Nothing was going to change until this Christmas card accidentally ended up at my house instead of being sent to his office. Linda had been silent during our conversation, but now she spoke up. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "I can't keep living this lie, and I can't ask my children to keep living it either. Emma shouldn't have had to carry this secret. Jake and Tommy shouldn't have to grow up thinking this is what families look like." She turned to me. "Dorothy, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for my part in this, even though I didn't know what I was doing. But I need you to know that I'm going to tell Charles that this has to end. Either he divorces you and commits to this family, or he needs to leave us alone so we can rebuild our lives without him. Linda, what if he chooses me? Then you'll have a husband who spent 18 years lying to you about having 3 children. Do you really want that?" She was right. Even if Charles chose our marriage, how could I ever trust him again? How could I look at him every day knowing that he had been capable of such elaborate deception for so many years? "What if he chooses neither of us?" I asked. "Then we'll both be free to find relationships built on honesty instead of lies." Emma nodded approvingly. "That's what I was hoping you'd both realize." As I drove home that evening, I realized that meeting Linda and Emma had changed everything. I was no longer just a betrayed wife seeking answers. I was now part of a complicated situation involving innocent children who needed adults to make difficult but ethical decisions. Charles called my cell phone 6 times during the drive home. I didn't answer, but I listened to his increasingly desperate voicemails. "Dorothy, please call me back. I know you're angry, but there are things you don't understand. Dorothy, I love you. I've always loved you. This situation with Linda and the kids, it just got complicated over the years. Dorothy, I'm driving home right now. I canceled my meetings. We need to talk about this face to face." "Dorothy, please don't do anything drastic. I can explain everything if you'll just give me a chance." By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had made my decision. Charles was already there, waiting for me on our front porch. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, desperate. This was not the confident, successful man I had been married to for 35 years. This was a man whose carefully constructed world of lies had finally collapsed. "Dorothy," he said, standing up as I approached the door, "thank God you're home." "Hello, Charles. We need to talk." "Yes, we do. But first, I think you should know that I spent today in Riverside, Illinois." The color drained from his face. "You met them." "I met your wife and your daughter. Your wife who has been waiting for you to divorce me for 18 years. Your daughter who has known about your double life for 3 years and has been protecting everyone involved because she's more mature than her father." Charles sat down heavily on our porch steps. "Dorothy, I can explain." "No, Charles. You can choose." I sat down beside him, looking at this man who had shared my bed and my life while living a completely separate existence with another family. "Here's how this is going to work," I continued. "Tomorrow is January 1st. On that day, you're going to make a choice. You're going to choose Linda and your children, or you're going to choose me. But you're not going to choose both anymore." "Dorothy, it's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. If you choose Linda and the children, I'll file for divorce immediately and you can finally give them the husband and father they've been waiting for. If you choose me, you'll never see Linda or those children again, and you'll spend the rest of your life trying to rebuild the trust you've destroyed. And if I can't choose, then I'll choose for you. I'll divorce you, and you can figure out your own life without dragging anyone else into your web of lies." Charles put his head in his hands. "I never meant for it to happen this way." "But it did happen this way, Charles. For 18 years, it happened this way. You made thousands of choices that led to this moment. You chose to lie to Linda about being divorced. You chose to lie to me about your business trips. You chose to let those children call you daddy while telling me you didn't want kids. You chose to maintain 2 families without either of them knowing about the other." I stood up and walked to our front door. "You have until tomorrow night to decide which life you want to live." But Charles, understand this. Whichever choice you make, there will be consequences. If you choose Linda, I'll make sure everyone in our circle of friends and family knows exactly what kind of man you are. If you choose me, I'll make sure Linda and those children understand that you abandoned them for a woman you've been lying to for decades. Dorothy, please. 24 hours, Charles. Make your choice. I went inside and locked the door behind me. The next evening, Charles knocked on our door at exactly 6 p.m. I let him in, and we sat across from each other in our living room, the same room where I had opened that Christmas card just 3 days earlier. "I've made my decision," he said quietly. "I'm listening." "I'm choosing you, Dorothy. I want to save our marriage." I had expected this. Charles was 58 years old. Starting over with a woman who had 3 children would be difficult and expensive. Staying with me was the easier path. "Tell me why," I said. "Because I love you. Because we've built a life together. Because 35 years means something." "And what about Linda and the children?" "I'll end it. I'll explain to Linda that I made a mistake, that I got in too deep and didn't know how to get out. I'll make sure she's financially secure, but I won't see them anymore." I studied my husband's face as he said these words. There was no anguish about losing his children, no grief about abandoning the woman who had waited for him for 18 years, just relief that he could choose the option that required less change to his comfortable life. "Charles, do you love Linda?" "I care about her, but..." "That's not what I asked. Do you love her?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he finally admitted, "I do love her." "And your children?" "Of course I love my children." "Then why are you choosing me?" "Because you're my wife. Because this is my real life." I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where our wedding photo had sat for 35 years. "Charles, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You just told me that you love another woman and 3 children, but you're choosing to abandon them to stay with me out of convenience and obligation. That's exactly what you just said. And if that's the kind of man you are, a man who would abandon the people he loves because it's easier than dealing with the consequences of his choices, then I don't want to be married to you." I picked up our wedding photo and handed it to him. "I'm choosing for both of us, Charles. I'm filing for divorce. You can go be with Linda and your children, or you can figure out how to live alone with the consequences of 18 years of lies. But you're not staying here. Dorothy, please. Get out of my house, Charles. Go to Riverside. Go to your children who spent Christmas Day wondering why Daddy wasn't there. Go to Linda, who has been planning a life with you for 18 years. And don't you dare come back here asking for forgiveness when you realize how hard it's going to be to finally live an honest life." Charles stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in our 35-year marriage. "You're really divorcing me." "I'm really divorcing you. And Charles, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly why." He left that night with 2 suitcases and the weight of finally having to face the truth about the life he had created through deception. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. I had documentation of Charles's financial obligations to his other family, evidence of his deception, and a paper trail that made it impossible for him to claim he deserved anything more than the bare minimum from our shared assets. But more importantly, I had Linda's cooperation. When I called her to explain what had happened, she was grateful that someone had finally forced Charles to make a choice, even if that choice was made for him. "Emma was right," Linda told me during one of our phone conversations. "We all deserved better than living in the shadow of his lies." "How are the children handling it?" "Better than I expected. Jake actually said he was relieved to finally understand why Dad was always leaving. Tommy is young enough that having Dad around full-time is just a pleasant change in routine. And Emma feels like she can finally stop carrying secrets." "And how are you handling having him there full-time?" Linda was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, Dorothy, it's been difficult. For 18 years, I was in love with the idea of Charles, the man who visited us and made us feel special and chosen. But the reality of living with a man who spent decades lying to 2 families, That's different. Are you going to make it work? I don't know. Charles is trying, but there's this underlying anger that I can't shake. Not just about the lies he told me, but about the fact that he would have chosen you if you hadn't kicked him out. He didn't choose us out of love. He ended up with us because he ran out of options. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Linda called to tell me that she and Charles were separating. The children deserve to have a relationship with their father, she said, but I deserve to have a relationship built on honesty and choice, not deception and default. How is Charles handling it? He's devastated. He finally realized that you can't build real relationships on lies. Even when the lies are exposed and you try to start over, the foundation is too damaged. A year after that Christmas card changed everything, I received another card in the mail. This one was from Emma, now a senior in high school. Dear Dorothy, it read, I wanted to thank you for having the courage to do what none of the adults in this situation were brave enough to do. You forced everyone to face the truth, and even though it was painful, it was the right thing to do. Mom is dating a really nice man who knows our whole story and loves us anyway. Jake and Tommy are doing well and still see Dad every other weekend. And I got into Northwestern on early admission, the same school where you and Dad met. I'm going to study social work because I want to help families navigate difficult situations with more honesty than our family managed. I hope you're doing well and that you found happiness too. I was doing well. The divorce settlement allowed me to keep our house and enough assets to maintain my independence. I had returned to substitute teaching and discovered that I still loved working with children, even if they weren't my own. I had joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and begun taking art classes that I had always wanted to try. But more importantly, I had learned something valuable about myself. I was stronger than I had ever realized. When my entire world collapsed in a single afternoon, I hadn't fallen apart. I had made difficult decisions with clarity and conviction. I had protected innocent children while holding adults accountable for their choices. Rehook number 4. But the most unexpected consequence of that Christmas card would come 2 years later, in a way I never could have imagined. 2 years after my divorce was finalized, I was working in my garden when a car pulled into my driveway. Emma Henderson, now a college sophomore, got out and walked toward my front door. She was taller than I remembered, more confident, clearly thriving in her new environment. When I opened the door, she smiled warmly. Hi, Dorothy. I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. Emma, of course not. Come in, please. I led her to my living room, the same room where I had opened that life-changing Christmas card, but which now felt completely different. Gone were the family photos of Charles and me. In their place were pictures of my nephews and nieces, my book club friends, and the shelter dogs I had helped find homes for. How are you enjoying Northwestern? I asked. I love it. And Dorothy, I need to tell you something. I'm doing my senior thesis on family dynamics and the impact of deception on children's development. My professor encouraged me to interview people who had experienced similar situations to ours. That sounds like meaningful work. It is, but that's not really why I'm here. Emma took a deep breath. I'm here because I've been thinking about something for 2 years, and I finally worked up the courage to ask you about it. What is it? Dorothy, do you ever wish you had had children? The question caught me off guard. In all my conversations with Linda and Emma over the years, we had never discussed my own feelings about motherhood. Yes, I said honestly. I always wanted children. Your father told me early in our marriage that his career was too demanding for family life, and I accepted that because I loved him and wanted to support his dreams. Did you know that he told my mom he couldn't wait to be a father? That he said having children was the most important thing in the world to him? I felt that familiar stab of betrayal, even after all this time. No, I didn't know that. Emma leaned forward in her chair. Dorothy, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I have something I want to ask you. It might sound strange, but I need you to hear me out. I'm listening. I know you're not technically my stepmother. I know the situation with my dad makes our relationship complicated. But Dorothy, You're the person who had the courage to tell the truth when all the adults in my life were living lies. You're the person who put children's well-being ahead of your own comfort. You chose to divorce Dad rather than force him to abandon us." Emma's eyes were bright with tears. "What I'm trying to say is that you've been more of a mother figure to me than I expected, even though we barely know each other. And I was wondering, would you be interested in having a relationship? Not as my father's ex-wife, but as someone who cares about me and my brothers." I was so shocked I couldn't speak for a moment. "Emma, what about your mother?" "Mom thinks it's a wonderful idea. She says you showed more maternal instinct toward us in one afternoon than Dad showed in 18 years of weekend visits." "And your brothers?" "Jake has been asking about you. He remembers meeting you that day at our house, and he's curious about the woman who fixed everything, as he puts it. Tommy doesn't really remember you, but he's 10 now and he's starting to ask questions about why his family was so complicated for so long." I looked at this remarkable young woman who had grown from a teenager carrying adult secrets into a college student studying to help other families navigate similar challenges. "Emma, I would love to have a relationship with you and your brothers, but I need you to understand something. I can't replace your parents, and I don't want to complicate your family dynamics any further." "You wouldn't be replacing anyone. You'd be adding something that's been missing." "What's that?" "An example of what it looks like to make hard decisions with integrity. An example of what it means to choose truth over comfort." Over the following months, Emma and I developed a friendship that neither of us had expected. She would visit during college breaks, and we would have long conversations about life, relationships, and the complexities of family dynamics. She brought Jake and Tommy to visit a few times, and I was amazed to see how much they had grown and thrived. Jake, now 14, was a thoughtful teenager who asked probing questions about ethics and decision-making. Tommy, at 10, was an energetic kid who seemed to have inherited Charles's charm, but without the deceptive tendencies. "Dorothy," Jake said during one of their visits, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you hate our dad?" I considered the question carefully. "No, Jake, I don't hate your father. I'm disappointed in the choices he made, and I'm sad about the pain those choices caused all of us. But hate takes too much energy, and I'd rather spend my energy on positive relationships." "Like with us?" "Exactly like with you." Tommy, who had been quietly playing with my neighbor's dog, looked up at me. "Dorothy, are you like our bonus grandmother?" Emma laughed. "Tommy, that's a perfect way to put it." "I think I'd like that," I said. "Being your bonus grandmother." Linda and I also developed an unexpected friendship over the years. She would call periodically to update me on the children's progress and to thank me again for forcing the truth into the open. "You know," she told me during one conversation, "I used to think you were the enemy, the wife who was standing in the way of Charles committing to our family. But now I realize you were as much a victim as we were. We were all victims of Charles's inability to make honest choices. Emma wants to invite you to her college graduation. Would you be comfortable with that?" "I would be honored." Emma graduated summa cum laude with a degree in social work and a minor in family studies. Her thesis, titled "The Impact of Parental Deception on Family Formation and Child Development," was selected for publication in a family psychology journal. At her graduation party, she gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. "2 years ago, I thought my family was broken beyond repair," she said, looking out at the crowd of relatives and friends. "My parents' relationship was built on lies. My siblings were confused and hurt, and I was carrying secrets that no teenager should have to bear." She paused and looked directly at me. "But sometimes families aren't destroyed by truth. They're rebuilt by it. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones brave enough to force you to face reality. And sometimes the most unexpected relationships become the most meaningful ones." After the graduation ceremony, Emma approached me with a wrapped gift. "I have something for you," she said. Inside was a framed photo of all of us: Emma, Jake, Tommy, Linda, her new husband David, and me, taken at Tommy's Little League game the month before. We looked like an unconventional but genuinely happy family. "Thank you, Dorothy," Emma said, hugging me tightly. "Thank you for showing us what it looks like to choose courage over comfort." Today, 5 years after that Christmas card changed everything, I have the family I never expected but always needed. Emma is working as a family therapist, helping other children navigate complex family situations. Jake is a senior in high school with plans to study journalism because, as he says, the world needs more people who are willing to tell difficult truths. Tommy is a happy 15-year-old who plays 3 sports and calls me every week to update me on his activities. Linda married David 3 years ago in a beautiful ceremony where I served as an honorary grandmother to the children. Charles attended the wedding but sat alone, a reminder of the isolation that comes from choosing deception over honesty. I still receive Christmas cards every year, but now they come from my bonus family, pictures of graduations and sporting events, and family vacations that I'm sometimes invited to join. These cards represent something that Charles's secret cards never did: authentic relationships built on truth and choice, rather than lies and obligation. People often ask me if I regret opening that Christmas card that December afternoon 5 years ago. They wonder if I wish I had continued living in ignorance, maintaining the comfortable illusion of my marriage. The answer is always the same: no. I don't regret learning the truth, even though it was devastating. I don't regret the divorce, even though it was painful. I don't regret forcing Charles to face the consequences of his choices, even though it destroyed multiple relationships. Because that Christmas card didn't just prove that my husband had another family, it proved that I had the strength to build a better life based on honesty and authentic relationships. It proved that sometimes the most devastating discoveries lead to the most unexpected blessings. At 65, I learned that it's never too late to choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and authentic love over comfortable lies. The family I have now may not be the one I planned, but it's built on a foundation that can't be shaken by deception because it's based on complete honesty. That Christmas card destroyed the life I thought I wanted, but it gave me the life I never knew I needed, and that, it turns out, was the greatest gift I could have received.